Make it real before you make it good. That's all this video is about. I don't know if we're going to get to reading all of the Family Proclamation or not, but I do know that I am going to film a video today, and it isn't going to be scripted, it isn't going to be fancy, but it's going to be real. And I'm going to talk about why it's so important to me to make both work. Why making LGBTQ stuff and making my religion work. Why not join another religion? Why not, just leave? I can still pray. I can still do all those things. I can read the scriptures. Why do I need to put in all this effort to do both? I will give a warning before we read the Family Proclamation, because that will be triggering to LGBTQ audiences. But I do want to talk. I think my neighbors are slowly becoming aware that I film videos in here, because when they open the door, it's always very quiet, and that used to not be the case. Why do I make it work when it seems like the whole world's against me? I am going to share my views on gender in the Family Proclamation, and I was thinking about it, and I'm like, I don't think there's a single trans person, LGBTQ person, that is going to agree with what I say. And I also don't think there's going to be a single LDS person that fully agrees with what I say. And there's a couple of really good talks, like Try by Henry B. Eyring, or Questions and Answers by Elder Ballard, rest in peace. These talks are really helpful and really good, and I will quote them all the time. I'm not going to quote them today because I really want to talk about what I personally believe. And let's go over the two views of gender, right, that are predominant in our society right now. There's the traditional family views of gender and LGBTQ, kind of, marriage is man and women only, like some of the Bible verses that they throw at you, and I don't know, I don't want to, discount any of that. I grew up believing that. I grew up reading the Family Proclamation every single day. And there's just a lot of views that no one can be a different gender, or people that, those views, it's hard for me to share them in a way that I can feel authentically like I'm representing this side of stuff. But I feel like often the argument is that God made two genders, man and women, and there's nothing else. There's no in between, and God did not make a mistake is something that was a popular concept or conjecture. And things like that. Those arguments fall apart, but we're not talking about arguments. We're talking about theology. And that's interesting, right? There's a huge difference. And I'm not here to argue. I'm here to kind of just explain. That's the whole point of this channel. If you think that this video is gonna make you feel empowered in your argument, you should click off right now, because this whole channel is about making peace between Christianity and LGBTQ. It's about basically finding a new solution. Not really finding a new solution, but essentially, I just want everyone to have hope that we can all be kind to each other, because there's hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on us trying to hate each other. And that's not what I'm about. That's not what we're about. As Christians, we're about love, peace, and unity. All right, so I explained that kind of basic ideology. Now let's go to what I would call the most modern ideology for gender. And again, this is my own paraphrasing. There are a lot of different models out there, a lot of different beliefs, and a lot of good research. And same with the traditional values that I said. There's a lot of good scriptures. There's a lot of good, probably research too. There's probably good research on both sides. All right, and then modern day ideology is love is love. We shouldn't gatekeep love, because that's ridiculous. And that identity is identity. People, who are we to say who someone else is? And there's a lot of you can be born as a gender, and then you have your gender identity, and when those mismatch and aren't accepted very quickly, it can cause high degrees of stress. And there is a lot of just conjecture and theories on both sides, but I think we also got to recognize that this is our first round of gender ideology with science. That's this was made during World War II. This was the content of our, like, we are still catching up to the knowledge we had about gender scientifically in World War II because of the book burnings that the Nazis did. Yeah, the famous videos of the book burnings and everything, that was a gender clinic. It was the first gender clinic. Then there was over 20 to 40,000 books in that clinic about research and of what was, happening. And we're probably just at the point where we're caught back up to then. Maybe a little bit farther, maybe a little bit behind in some areas. And so I think it's important to recognize that the ideology or of gender identity and what you're born as, like, that they're different. And it's like weird for me to talk about these things because honestly, I've never solidly fit into either ideology. Like when I read the Family Proclamation, I'm like, yeah, this is, if I take out the context of the world and the context of what people say, this is like, sure, like I can read it and it's like, okay, yeah, some of these things can be true. It's like reading scripture to me. Like I don't need to understand every little bit, but I can understand the pieces that I do. And it's totally fine to have the answer be, I don't know. And I can totally have the answer be fine with, I don't know. That's not going to be the case for most people that read the Family Proclamation that are LGBTQ, because most people haven't done as much DBT therapy as I have. It is a really big skill to hold conflicting beliefs. And it is something that I personally am pretty good at. And I really want to recognize that in a humble way that, like, I'm pretty good at that, and a lot of my LGBTQ brothers and sisters probably struggle with this a lot more than I do. And so I don't want this video to be a whole, like, look at me, this is the way it should be. No. I'm trying to share more information. If you're still here in the video by this far, I think you're probably on board with this whole idea of making peace. So please hit the subscribe button. I don't know how it's going to look, but I just want to start the conversation. I just want to make things happen. And I'm not here to be political. And if I am ever political, you can freely catch me. I will say the podcast is probably a little bit more political in nature just because we're mostly talking about the transgender experience and not just talking about kind of whatever we want to. This one will always have my experience as transgender because that's my perspective. But that doesn't mean I can't make content that, one, isn't religious, and two, isn't transgender based. But most of the content on this channel will be about peace and Christianity or about hope or kind of like spiritual nature topics, whether that mentions LGBTQ stuff or not, or both, or neither. And I'm excited. I'm really excited for where this channel is going. Okay, let's just get into the video. So we talked about the two ideologies of gender so briefly and probably so inaccurately. I'm going to link proper information for both in the description below. But that is the gist of where I'm coming from. I don't want to spend all this time writing a script of what is super technically accurate. I just want to give you guys the most authentic version of what I believe. It's going to be messy. It's going to be imperfect. There are going to be super big fallacies in it. And as a writer, as an author, that is so scary to allow that to happen. But I'm doing it because I think there will be benefit to it. So what I believed growing up about gender was that, I was aware that I was transgender when I was 12, and I didn't transition because I was kind of raised in a very, I want to say transphobic environment, but they were ignorant, and they still are, and they're purposely ignorant, and yeah, I love those people. Don't harass anyone that's related to me, and I just think that it was okay. But because I didn't come out and I was trying to force myself to not be trans for 12 years and putting myself through my own conversion therapy, I had to find things to believe. I had to find things that I could believe on my own. And that was really hard. I didn't know how to do that. And it was a really hard time in my life. But I remember at some point, probably over 5 years, what I landed on was gender is something you're born with. What's the big deal? Why are we talking about it? And who cares? If someone, let's say, male is born over here and female is born over here, And then your whole life, I think you could go, like, how you act and behave. You can pretty much do a lot of this, you know? And I mean that by, like, our society places a lot of expectations on gender, both in performance, in jobs, and so many different things, in dressing, in clothing, and how you talk to someone. It is so constantly in society everywhere. And so for me, it's like, why are we placing so much emphasis on just something that people are born with and not who they are? And to me, I didn't really like form any conjecture about like transitioning or whatnot, but I was just like, if there's this and this, and there's this line here, and if someone's on this side of the line and they want to be called female, I don't care where they were born at. I care how they currently are, and I'm going to treat people how they currently are. And that's kind of just my own philosophy that I had. It's not a very in-depth gender ideology. It doesn't take into account intersex people that are born along this line. It's got a lot of flaws to it, and I no longer totally believe that. Which is kind of crazy for me to say, because it was like, for a long time, I was like, why are we placing just so much emphasis on this thing when people are so different and so unique and so individual? And I didn't form any conjecture about whatnot with gender. All right, but what do I currently believe? Well, there are some studies that support this, and I'm not going to get into them too specifically, but they're my personal hypothesis based off just kind of a person who reads 2 or 3 studies once a month about gender and transition and transgender, is that I believe, and maybe this is like stepping on other people's feet, and maybe this isn't perfect, and, you know, that's okay. It's just something I believe, and, you know, like, we don't have a ton of knowledge about this in scripture, and we don't have a ton of knowledge about this in medicine and science yet, and I personally believe 2 things. One, I believe that we do not know, scripturally, spiritually, we do not know what is going on with transgender people or LGBTQ people of any sort. We do not have enough scripture to know how to basically judge them, and we shouldn't judge them. And even there's a lot of quotes from LDS apostles that basically say, we don't know. We don't know what the doctrine is about this. We know that the doctrine we do have is true, these little things, but we don't have doctrine specifically for this subgroup of people. That's like specifically addressing this subgroup of people and not the masses. And a lot of it has lately been more about like approaching with love, approaching with this, and like no contention, don't be contentious. And that's kind of where we're at. It's basically a lot of like the official policies and stuff are, yeah, some of them probably have a ways to go. And we talk about this in the podcast. But a lot of some language has more officially been lately of like, judgment isn't your responsibility. That is your bishop's responsibility to decide, you know, what happens. And I think that's cool. And if you're a bishop, you're not supposed to like judge people outside your ward or your flock or your congregation. That's kind of what it's saying. So that's like kind of what I believe, first off, is that we just don't know. We don't know scripturally, and we don't know scientifically yet. We're starting to get some pretty good guesses scientifically, but I don't think we're 100% there yet. What I personally believe is that transgender people are born intersex, not with physical characteristics, but with mental ones. There will be more information in the description if you're interested in like places to research and to know more. But the basic idea is in the womb, we all start off as female, and let's do the metaphor. There's a ship that sets sail to male sometimes. And when intersex people are born, the ship for the body sets sail to this island that is male. And you start out as female on the female island. And somewhere in it setting sail, it crashes. And for intersex people, they always have a very clear gender identity that is independent of whatever surgery that their parents decide to give them. All like gender corrective surgeries, all sex reassignment surgeries were invented for intersex people that were born with ambiguous genitalia. And so my personal theory is that we have the same ship in our brain, where our brains start out as female, and the ship sets sail to male, and it crashes down somewhere in between. But it also is not something that really has been researched for people with gender dysphoria. There is a really cool study where like they have found that people's brains with gender dysphoria are not male or female. They're not even close to the binary, that they are pretty in between most of the time. Pre-hormones. After hormones, they finally go to one side. And I personally believe the finally going to one side instead of my brain being stuck in between is where so much relief was found. And so, yeah, we just don't have a ton of brain science right now about the brain and gender, of how the brain relates to gender. We do have the ability for trained neurologists to kind of recognize what a brain is, male or female, based off gender based off brain scans, based off gender and stuff. But when these people look at a brain that has gender dysphoria, they actually can't tell. They drop from 95% accurate to like 50% accurate. This is one of my favorite studies because I think it is the most insightful to my experience. That my brain was like stuck in between, and it really wanted to go to the female direction, and it was trying. It was most of the way there. And it was like my brain had a blueprint and my body had a blueprint, and they didn't match. And it was causing so much constant distress. And there's some people, like, transition isn't about transitioning from one gender to another. It's about exploring and moving on with your life. It's about stopping the repression of yourself and exploring yourself and letting that lead wherever it does. And even if that leads to, like, transition's not right for me, there's plenty of time to stop before you do anything that's, like, lasting and permanent. And so that's kind of, I personally believe that. I believe that we don't know a lot of these things, but I think that there's some good indicators that there's a physical component in the brain that happens, and that allowing it to go in a line with identity fixes a lot of things. For me, the biggest relief I had when I went on hormones was mental. It just felt like this weight was taken off me. It felt like I didn't have headaches constantly. It felt like there wasn't just static in my brain. And it was like, honestly, I felt like I had 4 more hours of capacity every day. And by the time that I had done hormones, I was already lost so much of myself. I had already lost such large pieces of myself. I hadn't transitioned. I wasn't doing gender affirming care, and I was already not able to have a job for over a year. I was in mental hospitals. I was doing all these things, and I was trying really hard to not be trans until finally I was like, let's just try it, And it was helpful for me, and it's like, yeah. And I recognize that some people might be like, no, it's not helpful, it is helpful. And it's like, guys, it's a medical treatment. No medical treatment is ever going to be 100% effective. No medical treatment is ever going to be all or nothing. And that's the point. All right. That is my main thoughts on gender ideology. I am now going to read the Family Proclamation. Should this be a new video? Yes, it will be in a new video. I decided in filming this that I like making scripted videos better. Not even scripted, but like really well written out so that my thoughts are just more concrete. And yeah, that's kind of just the take on what I kind of believe about gender. I really didn't get much into the why it's so important for me to stay. And that's probably a whole new video in itself. But I really thank you for watching, and I really hope that we all gain some more perspective today, and that it's okay that we all can have different beliefs and also support, accept, and encourage each other. We're all human here. So, like and subscribe. Have a good day. Bye.